Welcome to the Control-Alt Society podcast. The famous red state, blue state map that dominates our screens is not a symbol of a functioning democracy. It is, in fact, a map of captured markets and geographic monopolies.
Yeah, I mean, we are really looking at a system that completely relies on keeping the vast majority of the country entirely predictable.
Right. And in our deep dive into the sources today, we're really going to dissect the mechanics of how this happens, like how winner-take-all systems manufacture what researchers are calling a bipartisan cartel.
Exactly. We'll be analyzing, decades of election data, digging into the psychology of voter suppression by design, and this is the fascinating part, exploring the constitutional loopholes states have to just dismantle this cartel entirely.
Because the ultimate argument we're unpacking here is that every single U.S. state should be a swing state. This whole concept of lifelong party loyalty, this sort of manufactured herd mentality, it's a fundamental threat to a free society. So if you live in a safe state, whether you lean left, lean right, or just completely reject both, the data shows your political value has been structurally neutralized.
It really has. But, before we even get to the structural reforms, we have to talk about how artificial this entire red and blue paradigm actually is.
Oh yeah, because the map feels permanent, right? Like it was just written directly into the Constitution.
Right, but it's actually a surprisingly recent media invention. I mean, the historical sources are super clear on this. Prior to the year 2000, there was no standardized color scheme for American political parties at all.
Wait, really? It wasn't always red and blue?
No, not at all. Television networks would actually just switch them up from election to election, and very often they used blue for Republicans and red for Democrats.
Wow, that just feels wrong to even hear.
I know, but it was done to align with the rest of the democratic world. Globally, blue has traditionally been the color of conservative movements, like the Conservative Party in the UK, for example, while red has, well, almost universally represented left-leaning or Labour parties.
Which begs the question of how we ended up completely backwards compared to literally the rest of the world.
Honestly, pure coincidence combined with just endless broadcast repetition. During the 2000 election between George W. Bush and Al Gore, Tim Russert and the graphics department at NBC just happened to assign red to Republicans and blue to Democrats for that night.
And as we all know, that specific election didn't end on election night.
Exactly. We had 36 days of recounts, court battles, hanging chads, all of it.
So for 36 days, the entire country was staring at that exact same graphic on their televisions.
Yeah, the colors became permanently seared into the American consciousness just by sheer exposure. It was never some official party designation. It was literally just a temporary graphic design choice that froze into an absolute cultural identity.
It's wild that a completely arbitrary broadcast decision now defines how millions of people identify themselves. But what is infinitely more alarming than the colors is the total paralysis of the map itself.
Right.
Our sources point out that out of 50 states, 35 have voted for the exact same party in every single presidential election since that terminology started in 2000.
Yeah, that's a huge majority of the country just locked in place.
Over 2 decades, only 15 states have swung at all.
And we really have to interrogate why the map is so frozen, because it is absolutely not. Because those 35 states are ideologically monolithic.
Right. Everybody knows their state is a mix.
Exactly. Every state is a complex, diverse mix of voters. The paralysis is actually the direct result of a specific rule, the winner-take-all mechanism.
Which is what 48 states currently use, right?
Yep, 48 states use it to award their electoral votes. Basically, if a candidate secures 51% of the popular vote in a state, they are awarded 100% of that state's electoral votes.
Which instantly, just mathematically, erases the other 49% of the voters in that state.
Just shreds them. Millions of ballots are effectively thrown out when it comes to the final national tally.
So academic sources describe this dynamic as a static bipartisan cartel. The outcome is predetermined by the math, which actively forces a herd mentality on us.
Yeah, because when any dissenting vote feels structurally useless, citizens are socially and institutionally pressured to just conform to whatever the region's dominant alignment is.
Okay, let's unpack this with a tangible comparison. Think about a fast food chain.
Okay, I'm with you.
If that corporation knows you are going to eat their food every single day, no matter what happens, they have zero incentive to offer you discounts.
Right. They definitely aren't going to spend money improving the menu for you.
Exactly. They only spend their marketing budget fighting for the undecided customers who are just wandering around the food court. So structurally, are the political parties just treating 80% of the country like captive consumers?
Yeah, that is exactly it. Research from Stanford University validates that exact economic parallel. They outline this really harsh economic reality regarding the Electoral College.
Which is?
Well, every vote is equal on paper, but in practice, some votes are much cheaper to acquire than others. The Electoral College doesn't defy the laws of supply and demand, it aggressively enforces them.
Because campaigns are these multi-billion-dollar enterprises with finite resources, right?
Exactly. They literally cannot afford to spend money in safe states.
Mhm.
If spending $10 million in California only moves the needle by 2%, well, a candidate gains exactly zero additional electoral votes.
But if they spend that same $10 million in Nevada,
A 2% shift wins the entire state's electoral payout.
wow. So they are financially forced to ignore their loyal customers and just dump everything into a few volatile micro markets.
Completely.
Which really brings us to the actual dollar cost of this cartel. If millions of votes are effectively erased by the math, campaigns have absolutely no financial incentive to care about those voters.
And you see it in the data. Look at the campaign disparity. In the 2016 general election, a staggering 94% of all campaign events were held in just 12 states.
That is a complete geographic monopoly on political attention.
And it is even more concentrated than that, actually. Two-thirds of all those visits were hoarded by just 6 pivotal states, places like Ohio, Florida, and Pennsylvania.
Meanwhile, 28 safe states received 0 or maybe 1 visit across 5 entire election cycles.
Just total radio silence.
Imagine being completely ignored by the people asking to lead you for 20 years. But it goes way beyond just campaign rallies and handshakes, doesn't it? It bleeds into actual governance.
It does. The sources reveal this deeply unsettling statistic regarding the weaponization of federal policy. Highly competitive battleground states actually enjoy up to an 8% increase in federal grant funding prior to elections compared to safe states.
Wait, hold on. I understand campaign rallies targeting swing voters, but are you seriously telling me federal grant money and disaster declarations are being manipulated based on a state's swing index?
As crazy as it sounds, yeah.
That sounds almost like a conspiracy theory. Does the data actually back that up, or are we just looking at a weird correlation here?
No, the academic tracking is incredibly robust here. Presidents have a significant amount of executive discretion on the margins when it comes to federal funding and disaster relief.
Okay.
And the data shows that swing states are twice as likely to receive presidential disaster declarations compared to safe states experiencing similar weather events.
Twice as likely. That is insane.
The electoral mechanics fundamentally distort executive action. If a storm hits a captured market, the political urgency to provide relief is statistically lower than if that same storm hits a county that could actually decide the presidency.
That is genuinely disturbing. It also just completely distorts the national conversation.
Right.
Because campaigns only care about these specific sling regions. Highly localized niche issues are suddenly elevated to massive national talking points.
Oh, absolutely.
We see fracking in Pennsylvania or corn ethanol subsidies in Iowa just dominating televised debate stages, while massive crises in safe states like wildfires in California or specific climate impacts in the Deep South are completely marginalized.
Because the candidates already have those electoral votes locked in, or they're completely out of reach anyway.
Exactly. And voters internalize this neglect. The turnout collapse in safe states is glaring. I mean, look at 2024. The voting eligible population, the VEP turnout in the 8 tightest swing states was 72%.
That in the safest states.
It dropped down to 61%.
Yeah.
That 11-point gap is driven purely by the psychological realization that a vote doesn't change the math.
Right. But, how do we even define these swing states? Are they just a static group of 12 states that dictate everything forever?
Well, statistical clustering from the 2020 election data shows us that swing states are actually constantly evolving. They have very distinct behaviors.
Yeah, so you have states like Iowa and Ohio that dominated elections a decade ago, but are clearly trending red and sort of exiting the battleground.
And then you have Colorado, Virginia, and New Mexico, which have basically shifted into stable blue territory.
So they are actively becoming captured markets.
They are, but a cluster containing Michigan and Minnesota is identified by the data as highly volatile and inconsistent.
Meaning the cartel's focus shifts rapidly based on these specific volatile micro trends. The battleground shrinks and shifts, but the vast majority of the country is just left perpetually in the dark.
Exactly. We've seen how states are starved of federal resources and campaign attention. But according to the sources, The cartel's most insidious effect is actually psychological.
Yeah, it really targets the voter's mindset.
It actively suppresses the next generation and tries to erase the fluid, independent voter entirely. Let's dig into how it crushes youth turnout, because this explains so much about lifelong political apathy.
So political science offers two competing theories here. You have the life cycle effect versus the cohort effect.
Okay, break those down.
The life cycle effect is the traditional assumption that young people don't vote simply because their lives are inherently unstable. They're moving out of their parents' homes, going to college, starting entry-level jobs.
So the assumption is they'll naturally start caring about local politics when they get older, buy a house, and start paying property taxes.
Right, exactly. But the cohort effect argues something much more profound. It posits that youth form lifelong civic habits based on their early political environment.
And the data comparing safe versus swing states heavily supports this cohort effect, right?
Very heavily. Consider a 19-year-old living in Pennsylvania versus one in California. In Pennsylvania, you have heavy campaign mobilization. The targeted digital ads, the door knocking, the peer-to-peer text messaging. It all lowers what academics call the informational cost of voting.
Because campaigns are spending millions to educate that 19-year-old on how to register, where their polling place is, and why their vote actually matters.
Exactly. And that sparks civic engagement that lasts a lifetime.
Meanwhile, the 19-year-old in California gets absolute silence. Without that massive campaign outreach, young voters lack the resources and the environmental cues to navigate what is a surprisingly complex voting process.
It really is. The system breeds lifelong apathy by starving novice voters in safe states of real competitive policy debates. Because they aren't exposed to complex, rational evaluations of candidates fighting for their vote, they are forced to just rely on heuristic cues.
Meaning simple mental shortcuts.
Simple party identification. You vote the way your family or your neighbors vote because the system doesn't provide the robust, competitive information required to do anything else. It forces a regional herd mentality.
But despite all of this systemic pressure, a massive chunk of the country is still rejecting the binary. The data shows 40 to 46% of Americans now identify as independents.
Of course, partisan strategists constantly dismiss this number. They claim these people are just leaners who secretly belong to a party but, just want to sound edgy or independent at dinner parties.
Yeah, I've heard that. But longitudinal data from Arizona State University thoroughly debunks that partisan myth. When you track these voters over multiple election cycles, independent voters show significant, genuine volatility.
They do. They change their voting choices 43 to 48% of the time, compared to only about 30% for registered partisans.
So these are true fluid voters actually evaluating candidates cycle by cycle.
Exactly.
Now, if you are listening to this and you call yourself an independent, you might think you've opted out of the system. But the data shows state laws are actively tricking you into behaving like a partisan.
Researchers call this the election law mirage. Let's look at New Jersey as a prime example here. On paper, New Jersey boasts a massive number of registered unaffiliated voters.
It looks like a haven of independent free thinkers.
It does. But because of institutional barriers, specifically closed primary rules, those independent voters face a massive hurdle. When they show up to vote in the primary, where the real decisions are often made, they're told they cannot participate unless they formally affiliate with the Democratic or Republican Party.
Wow, so they are just handed a partisan ballot and forced to pledge a team if they want to have any say in who actually makes it to November.
Yep. The cartel protects itself by structurally neutralizing voter fluidity. It herds you right back into the red or blue box.
The system is perfectly designed to maintain the monopoly. But, and this is the crucial part, the U.S. Constitution actually contains a built-in back door for the states to fix it themselves.
Yes. This is where we get into hacking the system. We don't necessarily need a seemingly impossible federal constitutional amendment to make every state a swing state.
Because under Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution, states have the exclusive and plenary power to award their electoral votes however they see fit.
Plenary meaning absolute control. No federal permission required.
Exactly. The states themselves created the winner-take-all system over the 19th century to consolidate their own regional power. And they have the absolute constitutional authority to end it tomorrow.
Which brings us to the first major proposal in our sources, the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, or the NPVIC. The mechanics of this are just fascinating.
How does it work?
It is an agreement where states pass a law pledging to give all their electoral votes to whoever wins the national popular vote. But the key is that it only takes effect once states totaling 270 electoral votes, the exact number needed to win the presidency, join the compact.
And currently, 18 states and the District of Columbia have signed on, right? Giving the compact 222 electoral votes.
Right. They only need 48 more electoral votes to hit the threshold and fundamentally alter how the president is elected, ensuring the national popular vote winner always becomes president.
Let's be strictly objective here and look at the pushback. One of the biggest criticisms of this compact is that it bypasses Congress. I mean, doesn't an interstate agreement of this magnitude require federal consent? Isn't it legally dubious to just rewrite the electoral mechanics without Congress weighing in?
It is the most common legal argument against the compact, for sure, but Supreme Court precedent severely weakens it. The court has ruled in major cases like Virginia versus Tennessee and U.S. Steel Corp versus Multi-State Tax Commission that congressional consent for an interstate compact is only required if the agreement threatens federal supremacy.
Meaning if the states are trying to steal a power that rightfully belongs to the federal government.
Exactly. But because the Constitution explicitly gives states the exclusive power to appoint electors, there is no federal power being threatened. You simply cannot encroach on a federal power that does not exist in the text of the Constitution.
That makes sense.
And organizations like the League of Women Voters have deeply analyzed the systemic impacts and found no evidence for the fear that this would create a tyranny of the majority. The checks and balances of the Republic, the Senate, the courts, all of that remains entirely intact.
But the NPVIC isn't the only solution on the table. The sources detail another structural fix that approaches the problem from the completely opposite direction. Fractional proportional allocation combined with ranked choice voting.
Oh, this one is super interesting.
Let's walk through the math on this.
Yeah.
Because it fundamentally changes the value of a single ballot. Instead of winner-take-all, a state divides its electoral votes fractionally based on the exact percentage of the popular vote.
Let's apply that to California. Under the current winner-take-all system, if a candidate wins 60% of the vote in California, they receive all 54 of the state's electoral votes. The 40% who voted for the other candidate get absolutely nothing.
Right.
Under fractional allocation, that winning candidate would receive exactly 32.4 electoral votes.
And suddenly, the remaining 40% of Californians just awarded 21.6 electoral votes to the opposition. Every single ballot just became a highly valuable commodity again.
Exactly. A Republican vote in deep blue California actually matters. A Democratic vote in deep red Wyoming matters.
And when you combine fractional allocation with nonpartisan open primaries and ranked choice voting, where voters can rank candidates by preference without fear of spoiling the election, you completely dismantle negative partisanship.
Campaigns are forced to fight for second and third choice votes everywhere, rather than just firing up their base in a handful of swing counties.
So if we look at this through the lens of captured markets, the NPVIC essentially merges all the regional monopolies into one giant, highly competitive global market, while fractional allocation goes the other way and turns every single state into its own highly competitive micromarket.
Yeah, either way, the cartel loses its guaranteed safe zones. By institutionalizing state-level competitiveness, you essentially invite responsible governance.
Because politicians suddenly have to listen to the policy needs of the entire country, rather than pandering exclusively to undecided voters in Pennsylvania or Nevada.
Exactly.
So, to sum all this up,
Yeah.
that red and blue map you see every election night isn't a reflection of our national soul. It is literally just a scorecard of geographic monopolies.
Yeah.
To have a healthy democracy, we need structural voter fluidity. We need systems that encourage us to evaluate ideas and demand resources, not freeze us into ideological herds based solely on our zip code.
And, looking ahead, there is an entirely new technological dynamic that none of these historical models fully account for.
What do you mean?
Well, with the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence and hyper-personalized micro-targeting, will the concept of geographic borders even matter soon?
Oh, wow.
Right. If AI allows campaigns to perfectly analyze and bypass state lines to target individual swing households directly based on their digital footprint, we might be looking at a total redefinition of what a captured market looks like. We could move from safe states to safe households.
That is a terrifying and fascinating thought to leave on. The technology is moving much faster than the electoral mechanics, and campaigns will always follow the path of least resistance. But until the structure changes, you have to look at your own participation in the system. If brand changed its CEO, its product line, and its mission, but you kept buying it just because of the color of the box, are you a free thinker or are you just a captured asset?